Great, thank you.
All right, so I'm Jamie. I am the Grants Contracts Officer at the Idaho Commission for Libraries. And after Patrick left us in the State Data Coordinator role, I took over because I had done it before, but it was kind of considered temporary. So I've been filling in, but now Kevin is going to be our new State Data Coordinator going forward. So he is picking this up and learning from me and you all as we get going. So please give him a little extra time to get back to you. He may be checking in with me or other state data coordinators to get more information before he can answer your questions. But we will get back to you whenever you ask us anything. So you have my contact information and his contact information. And I'm sorry, I forgot to take all of the animations out of this presentation. I thought I had already done it, but
Jamie?
Yes?
Could we just, Kevin, can you go ahead and just introduce yourself in case there are some customers who don't know you?
Hi, I'm Kevin Tomlinson. I'm the library consultant for regions 3, 4, and 5. So some of you don't know me. And I just started this about 2.5 weeks ago. So I'm learning too. I'll put my contact information in for you in case you don't have it.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so you can ask Kevin questions, and if Kevin's not around, you get an out of office or something like that, you can still send me questions and I'll get back to you as well. And so this is, I like to start with some basic information just to give everyone an overview, especially for those who are new. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. And then we'll get into the actual survey instrument on the Baker and Taylor website. But basically what you need to know is the survey is open now. It's going to be due January 1st. Here is the website information, and you should have a login and password that looks somewhat like the format given here. If you can't locate those, let me know and we can get you your login and password so that you can get in and see your survey. All right, so this is just a real quick, and I think I forgot to change the year here, so this should say January 1st, 2022, but basically you're going to submit your data by January 1st. And then Kevin with myself will be going through to verify and correct any data. So you may get an email from us saying, hey, you know, usually you enter 80 hours. This says 800. Did you accidentally hit an extra 0? Just to kind of clean things up before we submit to the federal level. And then we submit it to the federal system. They do additional data checks and may come back to us with some questions of their own where we may or may not need to come back and ask you some additional follow-up questions. And then once that whole process is complete, that's when we can do our publication and put our stats booklet out that you all have access to on our website every year. Oh, and sorry, I forgot about the animations this year. And I keep forgetting how many times I have to click to get everything to show. So I also like to just give a quick reminder for everyone on this survey that this survey obviously doesn't capture everything you do. It's a combination of federal questions, state questions, and then you can also have your own local data that you collect. So the federal questions are an agreement amongst all the US states and territories that will ask all the same questions in the exact same way so that we have comparable data from state to state. And then we have our state level questions that we at ICFL with input from you ask so that we are asking all of you the same questions with the same definitions so that we have comparable data within our state so that you can look at a library the next town over and see how your data compares to theirs. And then the local data is anything else that is useful to you for you to collect. So I get a lot of questions where someone may not be happy with one of the definitions on our survey, and it's kind of just, you know, collect what you need. If you want to present that to your board, great, but we need it in our format so that we can use the data for comparison purposes and to make sure we're counting apples to apples and not apples to oranges when we're trying to do state totals. So if you have any questions on definitions as you go through, certainly let us know that. The questions can change from year to year. So if we're getting a lot of feedback that a definition is not great and it's not fitting what we need, we can try to change that for future years. So it is really helpful to get that feedback from you all. And then real quickly, I just wanted to give the overview of the report period. So fiscal year 20 is what was just published. Fiscal year 21 is what you're going to be reporting on this survey. So that's October 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. And then the next report period is for fiscal year 22. So that would have started October 1st of 2021, going forward to September 30 of 2022. So for all these new questions we're going to talk about today, you need to start trying to collect your data to follow those definitions for the next submission. You don't need to worry about having your data in that exact format for this submission. Okay, oh, you know, I think maybe yep, this is my old presentation. That's why it's not doing what I thought it was going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this share and just go straight into the survey so that you can see, because that was the one that we did in May. If you want to see that presentation, it is up on our website where I kind of talk through the general changes that are coming. But I want to make sure, I'm going to check the chat real quick. Okay, I think we're good so far there. And then I will share my screen for the website. Okay, so this is the website that you're going to go to enter the survey. And I can copy and paste this into the chat real quick for everyone so that you can go there yourselves if you would like. And then I'm going to log in today as Aberdeen, just so that you can see how it looks from your viewpoint instead of my administration account. So you should see this login screen. And when you get in, you're going to see the list of all the surveys you've done. The survey you want to go into is the 2021 survey. And if you have trouble with the Baker and Taylor tool, there are help icons where you can click on that and it'll give you a phone number you can call if their website's not working. But if you have questions about the content of the survey, you need to be reaching out to Kevin and I. So we're going to go ahead and hit continue on the 2021 survey just to get in so we can start looking at it. So what you'll see, just a real quick navigation for those who are completely new and have never seen this before. To get around, all of the sections are on the side here. You can click on any of these sections to look at whichever section you want to work on right then. You can also hit the next and previous button to move back and forward through sections. And there is a save button at the bottom and top of each page to get around. You can also click on the instructions up here, which will pull up a version where you can save it as a PDF if you'd like. But it has all the definitions for all the questions. You can also get definitions by clicking on these question mark boxes, which I don't know if someone can tell me if you can see the pop-up. I don't know if it'll show since I'm sharing one thing. Tammy, can you see that?
Sorry, I was
Your
filming.
pop-ups don't show. Sorry, Jamie.
The pop-up doesn't? Okay, then let me just share this way and maybe that'll, hopefully you can see it now.
Yes. You can see it.
Okay. All right. So anytime you're working on a question, so if you were looking at this little library visits and you weren't sure what you should put, you can either go up to the instructions and go through there and scroll down to that particular question to get the definition, or you can just click on the little question mark. Oh, and it took me back to the very beginning, but you can just click on the question mark to get the definition right there while you're working on it. Other features that you can do, you can flag questions, and this allows you to go into the show status. It'll let me go. where you can then look and pull up all of your flagged questions. So if you're working on the survey and you have 3 that you need to come back to, you can flag them so that you don't have to scroll through the whole survey, and you can just come back and find the 1 or 2 that you needed to work on. You can also do unanswered questions by clicking here, and then all of the questions have, not all of them, but a lot of the questions have what we call edit checks, where what it's doing most of the time is looking at number ratios. So change from one year to the next, or certain things like if you have library staff and you say you have circulations, but then you say that the library was open 0 hours, that might pop an edit check because it's saying something's not right. The library should be open if you're providing services. And if you go through here, while so Aberdeen hasn't started entering data, so there's a lot of edit checks, but you can see the definition of the edit check. So for this one, they have 0 for the total number of registered users, and this item cannot be 0, so if something needs to be entered. So once they enter something, this edit check will go away. And to get rid of edit checks, what you need to do is put in a note. And so down here, we have notes. You can enter the local, state, or federal level. Local notes are nice if you are a director and you're coming in new. The person before may have left you notes on how they pulled that particular number in here, or if you're working through and you want to leave yourself notes for next year on how you got the number, that's a good place to put it because it gets saved with your data. You also have a state level note. So some of the edit checks will say, like, if you changed your address, please put something in the state note to let the state data coordinator know that we need to change it for you, because some of the fields like that are locked and you won't be able to make the change. And then the federal notes are the ones that go with the federal questions to the federal reporting system. And so for these, if they're asking, you know, circulation last year was 100 and this year it's 10,000, that's a really big change. Can you explain it? It's really helpful to give a descriptive reason for why it changed. So not to say that number is correct, because it is correct. What we want to see is something that says, you know, last year the library was closed for a good portion of the year. This year we were open a lot. And so that's why the number went up, because then we don't have to come back to you and ask any follow-up questions. It's very clear why the data changed. So you can get to those here under the edit checks, or if we go back to my survey, the note button here, when you click that under any question, it opens up the little box where you can add those notes. And you can also see if there was a note the previous year, you can pull that up for yourself so that you can see the prior year data. And then what I like to do, like when I'm checking through the surveys, I always click show last year's answers, because it gives me a quick visual cue if the data is off by a lot or is going to require a note. So for example, if we're looking at the library services section, I can see last year my total library visits were 9,938. If this year I'm entering 2,000, even if an edit check doesn't pop up for that, it's still something where I may want to enter a note to explain, so that later you're not getting an email from me or Kevin saying, hey, what happened here? Your numbers really dropped. So that's the basics of how to get around the survey. As you're going through, it automatically saves when you go from page to page. But if you're in the middle of the page, you can also hit save if you need to walk away. You can log out, come back later. And then when you're ready to submit, you hit the submit button and it will run all the background edit checks. And if there's issues, so like if I hit submit right now, it should give me this error page where it says, yes, all these questions are required. You need to fill it in before you can move on. So if there's any issues with your survey, when you hit submit, you should be able to see that and know what you need to go back and deal with before you can move on. Okay. Any questions so far just on survey navigation, basics of how to get around, where to find definitions? Okay, well, hearing none, if you guys think of them later, you can put them in the chat, or we can get to the end and you can ask me more questions and I can show you how to do stuff. So what I want to cover for the remainder of the time is the changes to this survey. There have been quite a few changes with COVID and just with some general conversations that have been going on at the state library level, there's been a big push to normalize data and try to collect it so that in different surveys that you may be doing, we're using like the same age group definitions. So one of the big things we're going to talk about today is programming. And the programming used to be children's, which was 0 to 11, and now it's 0 to 5 and 6 to 11. So we're going to do some changes like that as we walk through. So what I'm going to do at this point is just kind of go page by page and call out to you the things that you may want to watch for as you go through. In the early part of the survey, so like on page 1, there's really not much that has changed. This is just your basic information for your address. These things, anything that you see that's grayed out is a locked box because we pre-filled using the same information as the year before. And if anything changes here, like if your street address changes, when we submit it to the federal level, we have to enter some specific codes that say whether it was a physical location change or just an address change. So that's where we ask you to put in a state note so that we know how to code those things as we go through. But there aren't really any changes on this first page. And then for any of you with Lily website, you should be able to pull your website count, which is in section 11 from Lily. If you don't know how to do that and you need help getting them, Doug Baker can help you get those statistics so that you get an accurate count of your website visits. But then we'll just move on. So section 2, the main thing I want to call out is that the population of your legal service area. We just had the official census done for 2020. So we have all new official census numbers. Our Karen Lamont, who works with the statistics, used some GIS data and the recent census data to look for every single library and look at your boundaries and pull the population numbers from that new census data. So if you look at this and you think, hey, that number is really, really wrong, you can contact us and let us know, but it is coming from the census. So unless you have another official source that you want to use, that's the number we're going to be going with this year. I know in the past, Patrick told me we were using census estimates, but if a city had a number they preferred to use, then he would go ahead and use that. But since we have all official counts, we'd prefer to use that. So that's the main change for section 2. And you'll see the other things that are grayed out are these auto totals that will fill in as you fill in numbers up above. So it'll tell you like 2.7 is an auto total of 2.2 plus 2.4 plus 2.6. So if I go in and start putting in some numbers here, so we'll just put in 1. Then when we come down here, you'll see that it's auto totaled as I entered to get to 2. And I'm gonna take them out now just so I don't forget about them. Let's see. Okay, someone put in Doug's information, thank you. Okay, so that is the basics for section 2. I'm going to go ahead and move on to section 3. Like I said, most of the changes are later in the survey, so I'm going to be moving through this kind of quickly. So this section, there are some questions that pop up about counting librarians and other staff. I would suggest you look at the definitions for this closely. So like the wording for this one, you can see librarians with master's degrees from an ALA accredited program is very specific. So people that are in the job of a librarian with a master's degree, and then others holding the title of librarian. So if you have someone that's not got a master's degree, but they're a children's service librarian, they would go in 3.2. And then all other paid staff goes into 3.4. So you do get into situations where, like my position, I hold an ALA MLS, but I am not in a position that's considered a librarian. So if we were counting for ICFL, my position, even though I have an MLS degree, would go into 3.4 because it's not a librarian position. So there are sometimes questions with that. And then this again is just some general information on salaries, which we do get requests for a lot for comparison, and numbers of hours of work for volunteers. This is one where I did come back to some people last year just because with COVID, some people reported the same number in 2019 as 2020, even though libraries were closed. So you'll just want to make sure that you're giving accurate numbers and not just using the same number from year to year because you're estimating. So if you are doing an estimate of we average 20 hours a week, just make sure that you're calculating based on the number of weeks open and not the full year every year.
Jamie,
Yep.
we have a question on 2.3, so a couple pages back.
2.3. Okay.
And the
2.3.
question from April is, does this include non-resident users?
So no, your non-resident users should be a separate thing. If you look at the definition, so your legal service area are the people that are in your taxing district. So they're paying for services through their taxes. Anyone that's in an area that's under contract, another library is paying you to provide services to that group. So you shouldn't be charging those people for cards. And then your non-registered users would be people that are outside of your legal service area and any areas that you're under contract to provide services to. So hopefully that helps with that question. And then we have another one. What about library managers with Mls degrees who are over library departments? Yeah, that one always gets a little bit iffy. It just kind of depends on how you define that position. Are they still a librarian or are they really just administrative? If they are a straight administrator where their job is managing and they're not doing librarian type duties, I would maybe not count them as a librarian. But in a lot of smaller libraries, you are a 1 or 2 person shop where the director is the librarian as well. So it really just depends on that particular library. And when it comes to those type of questions, a lot of these, it ends up being an individual situation where we have to talk through what your particular library is doing to figure out how to count it. So if you have questions after you look at the definitions and look at what that job is doing, definitely talk to us and we can figure out how it should be counted. And those are really good things to put notes for yourself from year to year so that you know where each position was counted. So then the next year you don't have to figure it out again. Okay, so I think that's all the questions for that right now. So I'll get back to section 4. So sections 4, 5, and 6 are all about revenue and expenditures, and there really haven't been any changes. The only thing I will call out is that we're talking about the report period of October 1st, 2020 through September 30th of 2021. So if you got a CARES Act grant from us, you most likely got that money before the report period. So it shouldn't be included as income during this period, but you may have expended the funds during this period. So the expenditure should be included. The same thing with ARPA funds. If you got ARPA funds during the period, they should be reported as income. But if you haven't expended them yet, then you wouldn't count them as expenditures unless you spent all your money by September 30th of 2021. So again, there's no new questions in this area. It's just a matter of making sure that you're counting on the right time frame. And the reporting period for section 4. So the reporting period for the entire survey is October 1 through September 30 of each year. So for this particular report, it's October 1 of 2020 through September 30 of 2021. So that's the area of time that you're looking at your finances. And if you have questions on, so if you get grants from us and you're not sure whether they're federal, state money, other, you can ask and we can figure out what area those need to go into, because a lot of this is broken down by federal and state dollars. But I'm going to go ahead and just scroll through very quickly. You can see there's all auto totaling for each section. It'll add up for you, like this page adds up all of your operating revenue from the other sections. And this, a lot of times what we're doing is we're asking you questions and then we need to break it down in a certain way to report on the federal level. So these will be the questions that go up to the federal level instead of the individual breakdowns that were on the previous page. Okay. And so that was revenue, and then expenditures is pretty much the same thing. We're going to ask a few more questions about category breakdowns. So salaries and wages, employee benefits. Sometimes there's questions here. If you're paying any sort of benefit, so FICA, Social Security, anything that would fall into that benefit category that's not salary, then you should include it here. I think sometimes people don't realize if those things count, but they do. So if you have employees and they're at 20 hours or more, I think in the state, benefits are required. So then you should be reporting that here. So we break down staff expenditures, collection expenditures. So how much are you spending on print, electronic, other materials? And then if you do have a contract with another library, how much you're paying for that. And in the revenue section, sorry, we ask both how much you're receiving and how much you're spending if you're part of a contract library. And so I'm again going to go through this kind of quickly unless there's questions. Benefits are required if someone works 20 hours or more. I am not 100% positive on that, but I think in the state of Idaho, for most of like the city and state type employees, 20 hours a week is where like the Percy benefits kick in. So that'd be something that you want to talk to your individual entity about. But I think for public employees, it is at 20 hours. I could be wrong on that though. Okay, someone just put in, yeah. So Percy starts at 20, but health and such doesn't start until 30. So yeah, so you just need to be aware of that. Okay, and then this is regarding capital expenditures. Capital is like if you're doing building improvements and additions, new library, things like that. Okay, and so I'm again just moving through this kind of quickly because there's not really any changes for section 6, and I want to get to the other stuff before we run out of time. Okay, any questions up until this point? Health benefits, yeah, that can change from library to library and entity to entity, just depending on what your particular system offers. Okay, so section 7 is about your library collection. And there were a few federal questions that were added this year. And what I found is as I made the changes to the survey, I had to break things down a little bit in order to add them up for the federal question in the way we needed. So in general, section 7 is mostly the same as what you've seen before. Things may just be moved around a little bit or broken down into 2 pieces instead of before last year. It may have been just one question, but that was kind of what I had to do to get to the federal totals that we needed. So starting out here, we have library items added. So physical units, not electronic units, but physical items added during the year and physical items withdrawn during the year. And then what we tried to do is clean up the next sections so that everything was all together and very clear. So the definitions came out up top where you can see them. And then if you click on the individual definitions, it no longer includes everything. It's just the definition for that particular question. So if you're wanting to know the general parts that relate to this, you'll need to look at the section above. So for books, what we did is we have the book materials and then current print serial subscriptions right below that. And then it totals up to total print materials. And what you're going to see later is one of the new federal questions was total physical collections. So that's why we had had to put stuff together so that we could add up to the total physical collection. So after the print materials, we then have the e-materials related to that one. So for books, next is ebooks. We also added the idea collection this year. So we were able to pre-fill the number of books that are ebooks that are available to you through the idea collection. So you don't have to go pull that for yourself. You'll just need to do the questions you did before, where you're doing the ebooks that you are able to get through your consortia, the ebooks that you purchase on your own, and then the name of any consortia that you are a part of to get those ebooks. And then we have the total for the ebooks. The section following is for audio materials, so it's set up the same. We have the physical units, and then the audio that's downloadable through IDEA, that's pre-filled, and then what you have through your consortia and on your own. For the video materials, there's nothing provided by IDEA. So it's just going to be the physical units, what you have through your consortia, and downloadable units provided by the library alone. And then other electronic materials. So like if you have, here, I'm going to go ahead and open definition because there's a lot of questions about this sometimes. So things like CD-ROMs, if you still have disks, like computer disks, then that would be what you would count in this other electronic. Okay, let's see, we've got a bunch of questions. So let me see. The 7.2 referred to removed items or checked out items. 7.2 is what you've withdrawn. So if you've gone through and done some weeding and said these 3 books I don't need anymore and I'm going to discard them and put them in my book sale or the dumpster, that's what you're counting there, is those items that have actually been discarded from the collection, not the items that are currently checked out. That'll be circulation, which is a different section. RLA for Overdrive counted. I'm not sure what RLA refers to.
I got that, Jamie, if you want.
Yep.
So this is Dylan. Yeah, the reciprocal lending agreement, that is counted. That's one of the pre-filled ones we put in there for you. So since we had those stats, you'll find that
in the circulation section.
Under the circulation section. Yeah, I don't remember the exact 7 point something.
Yeah. So we'll get to that in a second. And then where do we find out how many books, audiobooks are consortia added? Our own library, is that on Overdrive somewhere? Yeah, so there's typically a account management type page with Overdrive or any other services you use where you can access accounts of what you have access to. And generally what you're doing is the number that you have access to on September 30th of 2021, since that's the end of the report period. But you should be able to go to your account pages and see what the count is on that date. And that's what you would use to fill in for these questions. And then ARPA purchases for the digital consortium that we bought. Yeah, if it was purchased during the year and it's something that you hold, it doesn't matter what money purchased it. This is just asking about the number of items. So whether it was ARPA or your own budget or the local charity gave you $1,000 for ebooks, that doesn't matter. We just want the count of the number of items. And yeah, for those who are in consortia, if you don't have access to the account management page, whoever does should be able to give you those numbers. And then tips for kids with audio and print. So yeah, those tend to go into, I think it's the physical items other. I'd have to look at the definition again, but there is a question for that where when you have those kits that are kind of the mixed materials, then you would put them into physical other items because they don't fit nicely into any of the other categories. Okay, I think we are caught up on questions for the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So we also pre-fill the state provided electronic collections, and then you would fill in any collections that you own. There are generally some questions about how to count electronic collections, so databases versus ebooks from Overdrive. I just responded to someone the other day, and it really comes down to the service model of the service you're using. and how you purchase the items. So if you have questions about certain things, I think it's Canopy is one where they have a couple different service models where you can buy items outright and then you as the library own them. You can pay for access to a collection for a set amount of time, or you can do like kind of a metered, buy as someone asks for it and uses it one time. So you don't keep the item, you just get it for that one-time use. So that's where it's really hard for me to answer the question without looking at the service and what you're paying for. So you'll just kind of need to look at definitions and say, okay, is this something where I'm purchasing the item outright and my library gets to keep it forever? Is this something where I'm purchasing access for a set amount of time to a set size collection, or is this something where I'm buying things individually? And depending on how those answers come out, that changes where you would put the item. Okay, we've got, so this says, if you are in an Overdrive consortium and don't have Advantage accounts, then you won't have any ebooks or e-audio that only your library owns. You'll just have what the consortium owns. Yeah, so that's where it's going to depend library to library how the stats look. Some people only have ebooks from the consortia. Some people have ebooks from the consortia and that they own separately. Same thing for the e-audio and the e-video. A lot of consortia don't have e-video. So those numbers are very individual depending on what your library is doing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page. So again, these are kind of just the auto totals that will fill in as you fill in your information, but they're the ones that kind of calculate up, like I said here, the total physical collection size is one of the items that we are going to be sending to the federal level, and the reason why we had to kind of break things down to add them up. Okay, so section 8, we'll get to circulation in a section. Section 8 is library services, and things like the service hours total up from the branch level, your outlets that are in section 12. And we're also asking, so like for your library visit, we're asking whether it's a annual count or an estimate so that it's clearer in the data when you're comparing to another library, whether this is a real count from a door counter of everyone who came through the door, or whether we're estimating based on an average week. Same thing for reference transactions. I think most people estimate based on an average week or two throughout the year, but it just makes it a little clearer on what type of data you're looking at. Square footage will also total up from the outlet level. And let's see. The 7.1.2 refer to all physical items, books, movies, etc. Yes, so physical items added and removed from the library is talking about anything physical in your collection that was added, whether it's a book, a DVD, a kid's backpack kit, anything that is a physical item from your collection. Okay, so circulation obviously relates to your collection, and this is where, again, we had to break things down a little more. And if you're not able to provide the data for this year in this format, please give us what you can and then enter a note. Last year, we had circulation of adult materials and circulation of children's materials, and there was no question about circulation of young adult materials. So it was really hard to know whether people were using 0 to 11 or 12 for the cutoff for children's materials, or 0 to 18 to count for all the stuff that was not adult material. So this is just trying to get a better breakdown of those items so that we know that we're comparing apples to apples when we're looking at circulation and collections. And then again, we're looking at circulation of different types of items. So your physical books, physical videos and DVDs, other items physical. So this is where those types of kits that have the mixed media would go in for circulation. And then we have a total physical circulation that gets totaled up from all these things. Okay, and then we've got, yeah, the YA and children's before. That's where it wasn't very clear because it seemed like there wasn't, I got different answers from different people on what they were including in that children's material. So this way we'll just get a better breakdown of knowing that children's material is all for the same age group and not including two different age groups that someone else may not be including. So here is our circulation for electronic materials. And as someone asked about previously and Dylan mentioned, we have the circulation of IDEA materials that we were able to pre-fill. So the items from IDEA that your patrons use. And then we also have that reciprocal lending library materials through IDEA. We were also able to pull that for you and pre-fill it. So you shouldn't have to worry about pulling those numbers. What you're going to need to be able to pull is the circulation from your library patrons of your consortium materials, and then the circulation of electronic materials that you individually own. So electronic circ, would that include Overdrive circulation? Yes. Yeah, so if you have collections through Overdrive, yeah, you'll count them here. And then we've also pre-filled the state use of electronic collections, and then you'll just need to get the use for your electronic collections. Again, with a lot of these services, you should have access to some sort of account management, dashboard, where you can pull those numbers for the time period that you need. Oh, okay, that's not another question. Okay, and then again, these are just some auto totals. And I'm gonna pause for just a second, just to make sure there's no other questions about circulation, items. We're about to get into programming and there's a big whole thing there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So I just want to reiterate again here that these are all brand new questions for this year. You may not have the data in this format because you weren't told about these, that they were coming until May or June. And so we don't expect that you were collecting the data last October when you didn't even know this was going to be a collection. So if you don't have the data in this format for all of this, please just enter NA, so not available. That's the code that we use to know that you didn't collect that data. And that's the same for any question. You can enter NA if you don't have the data. If the answer is 0, please enter 0 because that's an accurate count. But if you just don't know and it wasn't collected, just enter NA. And just so you're aware, so 10.1 to 1017 are the new questions, and there's a lot of sub questions in those categories. But then the old questions from last year are after that section. So you'll be able to enter your numbers like you did last year in that section so that we still have the data for everyone for this year. So for this year, if you can provide the data for 10.1 through 10.17, please do. If you can't, that's fine, just enter it in the old numbers. And then next year, the old questions are going to go away, and these are going to be the questions that are available. So I strongly suggest you come look at the definitions for these so that you can start counting the numbers this way. And what the federal level was looking at is trying to account for live programming, asynchronous programming, programming on-site at the library, programming off-site, but still hosted by the library. So it just added up to be like 30 some questions by the time I broke it all down, because we're also breaking down the children's age group from 0 to 11 to 0 to 5 and 6 to 11, so that we can match some of the other, I think it's the like the summer reading surveys that use those age groups, so that everyone's kind of collecting data on the same age level. So getting started here, this is the synchronous program. Synchronous means that you have a library staff person who is actively giving the training. So right now, I am actively training you is live. If you were to later be watching this recording, that is a asynchronous thing. So synchronous programming, we're live, we're in the library or offsite, and then we have our different age groups. So you can kind of see the breakdown, for example, in 10.1. So synchronous programs targeted at children 0 to 5 on-site, offsite, virtual. So this one would be a virtual type programming. And then it totals up all of the synchronous programs for 0 to 5. And then right below that is ages 6 to 11, and then 12 to 18, and then 19 and older, which is the adult age, and then the general interest, again, on-site, off-site, virtual, and then the total. So it's a breakdown, but it gives us really good data for what everyone is doing. But again, you don't have to have that for this year. And then what this does is it takes all of those different age groups, and then it totals up all of the in-person on-site program sessions, in-person off-site, virtual. And then we also have kind of the same breakdown for attendance then. So we held the program, we know how many programs we have, now we want to know the attendance at those programs. Let's see. So general interest programming is for one, yeah, aimed at family, or it's not specifically geared towards 0 to 5, 6 to 11, 12 to 18, or adult. So if it's just kind of a everybody's invited, that would fall into general interest. Are attendance numbers average or overall? So are you asking if you do an average attendance or if you need an actual total? In general, we prefer actual totals whenever you can get them. But if you look at the definitions for some of the virtual ones, you'll see that the definition for the federal questions says something about counting the number of connected devices instead of the number of people you see in the computer screen. So if I had my window open where I could see all your faces and I could count 40 of you, I know that there's probably 40 separate devices. And then if in one of the windows there's 3 people in the window screen, I'm not supposed to count 3 people. So you'll want to look at the definitions for those. When you have in-person programs, if you can see that there's 15 people in the room or 18 people in the room, then you want to do those live actual counts. You don't want to just say, I have an average attendance of 3 people per program. So whenever you can give actual numbers, it gives us better data versus the estimate. What about something like an ongoing makerspace? Is that programming? No, not unless you're holding a specific event. So if it's just open and available to the public, that wouldn't be considered a program. There are some questions at the very end of this that I'll get to in a minute, where we talk about kind of like the story walks and grab and go kits, where it's something where it's kind of a, I'm trying to think of the word. I have it in the survey. We'll get to it in a second, but it's more of a self-paced program that there's not a librarian actively involved in programming it. Those you can count in other places. But if it's just something where it's like, I have a computer and people can sign up to use it, that's not programming. And someone says, are these numbers, I think YTD is year to date or numbers of attendees. You want to count the number of attendees at the program individually and then add them up over the year to enter the total. Yeah, if there's a librarian actively there, but it's just open, I wouldn't call that programming. It's just a service you provide. But if they put on a class where they're going to say, hey, let's learn how to use the 3D printer, and I'm putting on this class Thursday at 5 p.m. and it's open, and then 3 people show up, that would be a program where you have an attendance of 3 people. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of scroll through here. Again, this is all the attendance for all the different age groups. And then that is also going to get totaled up at the end so that we have the in-person on-site program attendance to go with the in-person number of programs. And then down here, we have the number of asynchronous program presentations developed for different age groups, and then the views. So for the views, note that they set the federal definition to say views within 7 days. So a lot of people will put something up and maybe they leave it up on their website for 30 days indefinitely. what they want to capture is the number of views that happen within the first 7 days. So if you haven't, these are all new, but if you were looking at your views for other things and kind of just counting the total for the year that you had, you'll need to make sure for next year to make the change that I posted it on Monday. Next Monday, I need to go and look and see how many views I have, and that's what I'm going to mark in my spreadsheet for this program to track throughout the year. And that 7 days is for everything. This is one I can tell you that there's been a lot of discussion amongst the states on the 7 days because a lot of people don't like it. They don't think it's fair. They think it should be longer than that. But they're, again, trying to get apples to apples information. So comparing a program that was maybe up for 2 days versus one that was up for 30, it's hard to get that data to match. So this is how they decided to approach it for this year. And then, so this is the one I was talking about. So self-guided activities. If you have something in your library where you do like the grab and go bags, or my sister was a children's librarian and they had, I think it was like a library search or maze that she did where they had an activity where they could come into a table, pick something up, and then go around the library finding all these different things. So things like that, you can tally how many people do it throughout the year and then put it into these self-guided activities because it doesn't fit the general definition of a program for the survey. So you can count the number of activities, the participation in those, and then we're also looking at grabbing the participation, the number of community events you do. So again, sometimes when the library attends like the city fair, that doesn't really meet the definition of program, but you were there. Maybe you go to the Rotary Club meetings and participate in those types of boards or groups. We want to just kind of get an idea of how many of those types of events you are doing. And again, with any of these, any data for any of the questions, you can always add a note. So if you wanted to, you could put in, 10 and then write in some data that says we are members of the Rotary and we go to City Hall to give more meaning to your data, but it's not required for these questions. Okay, so these are the prior questions. They just have new numbering. So for this year, we're asking you to put in this data. You probably don't have the other data, so just put in NA for all of those. And then these are the same answer or the same questions as the year before, where you can just fill in children's, young adult, program attendance, and number of programs. And then next year, this will go away and we will only have the other questions. So any other questions on programming? I know we're getting close to the end of time. Okay, I'm going to go through really, really quickly, and I can stay on for a little longer if anyone needs to stay and have questions. So again, no changes to this, interlibrary to and from, and then number of computers. The only change here is that we're going to be auto totaling some stuff up from the outlet level, and you won't have to input it on the main level. And also some other questions on, is it an actual count or an estimate? And then in section 12, which is the outlets, the main thing to note is that we took out all of the questions about the hours and days that you were open because we found that it wasn't really being used and it wasn't very accurate, especially during the pandemic when everybody's hours were changing all the time. So we just went ahead and took that out. So you will not need to worry about that for this year. You'll just need to do the public service hours per year and the number of weeks open. And then if you were closed any weeks because of COVID or had limited occupancy, then those would be things that you're filling in for this year. And then I'm going to skip over section 13 and not show it here since this is going to be recorded. Section 13 is the trustee contact information. And since it's going to have Aberdeen's information, I don't want to record it and then put it online. The only change to note there is that we've asked for trustee email addresses this year in addition to the normal information. And the only reason we want that, if your trustees are concerned, is so that we can send out like our trustee connections newsletters and have good contact information for them if we're planning a training for trustees, or need to let them know that like, hey, there's going to be trustee training at ILA that we'd like to, get you there for. That's the type of email they're going to be getting. It's not going to be put on our website or made public. It's just for us to contact them about trustee items. And if your trustee doesn't have an email, if you have a library email that you've made available to them, you can put that. If they absolutely don't have one, then just put NA for not available. And then we'll just go from there. Oh yes, and Kevin put in for sending out the Envoy newsletter. Okay, so again, I'm not going to show that just so it's not on our website with some people's information. And then the last section, so this is the same as last year, where there's just some yes, no questions for COVID responses. There's less of them this year because some of them only made sense to ask in the first year. And so for this year, they've dropped off, but it should just take you a few seconds to go through and mark yes or no for these. But that is the whole survey. So once you get through and everything's answered, you hit submit, hopefully everything goes through. What happens on our end is Kevin and I will be looking through, in addition to the edit checks, to see if anything really stands out to us as, hey, this seems a little odd, or the computer didn't check this, but it seems like a typo. Maybe we can get a little more information while it's still fresh in your mind before you forget, so that we don't have to wait 3 months and then ask you something. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and open it up, and any questions you have, feel free to ask. I'm going to stop sharing for now, just so I can see everybody. And if you have questions that you would prefer to send me later, that is fine as well. Like I said, going forward, Kevin will be the point person, but he's still in training. So for a little bit, it'll probably be me getting back to you.
While some of you are thinking of your questions, I'd just like to take a minute to introduce you to one of our newest staff members. Ash Whitwell is the public library consultant for areas 1, 2, and 6. So that's Northern Idaho, Idaho County and above, and then also kind of northeastern Idaho. So that includes Lemhi, Custer, Butte, Clark, Jefferson, Fremont, Madison, and Teton counties. Ash, you want to just say a hello, and then you'll take a prominent screen and people can see your face and know who you are. Looks like you're still muted. Oh, nope, we cannot hear you, Ash. You'll get that figured out here.
All right. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. So this is Ash. Ash, we're happy to have him on board at the Commission for Libraries. He is Kevin's counterpart. Kevin, who many and most of you know, working as the public library consultant in the 3 other regions in the state. So thank you, Ash, for popping on. And now we'll turn it back to Jamie. It looks like there is a question in the chat.
Yeah, so the question is about one-on-one sessions with patrons for things like tech tutoring and exam proctoring. So those, as of right now, are not really captured in the survey because they fall outside the definition of reference transactions, and they also don't fall into programming. So if that's something that interests everyone, later on, maybe we could add a state level question to try to capture those, because I know they do. You can easily spend half an hour to an hour working with a patron, teaching them how to use a computer, but it doesn't fall into reference. So for now, you just don't capture those for us. You can certainly capture those for yourself to relate to your board, but for now, they're not part of the survey. So would this include 3D print sessions then? I assume you mean that's the time that it takes to maybe just turn on the printer and run it for someone who's submitted as a design that needs to be printed. Yeah, that would kind of be the same thing, where it's just a service you provide, but it doesn't fall into any of the definitions that's on the survey. So it wouldn't be counted for this. you could certainly, I would keep the metric for yourself of the number of times you printed something, because it obviously shows you whether or not that 3D printer is getting enough use to maintain its spot in the library. Yeah, patrons can book an hour session to learn how to print and then try it themselves. Yeah, so since that's still kind of one-on-one and it's not really in the definition of a program and it's not really in the definition of a reference transaction, it doesn't really fall into any of the ones we have. And I know we are at time, so if you need to go, please feel free to go and send us your questions later. I know a lot of times the questions don't come until you kind of get going and really looking at the questions. So feel free to contact us later. If you want to stay on the call, we can stay on for a little bit to see if anything else pops up. The recording will be posted on the STAT website once we have it up. So let me grab the link for that real quick and I'll put it in the chat. But if you go to our website under library staff, there is a link for library statistics. And it is located here. So once we get the recording finalized and downloaded, we'll get it up on the website, and then I'll send the link out for it to all of the people that were on the invite for this.
Any other questions? Well, I'd just like to thank Jamie for doing such a thorough overview. It's hard, I know it's something you only deal with once a year. So kind of getting a little refresher before you delve in, but rest assured that Jamie and Kevin and the rest of us are here to help you through it. And hopefully we can get things submitted, and then we submit them, as you know, up to IMLS, so that there is a look across the nation at what's happening in libraries. So thanks for being part of this.
So there's a question about summer reading. So breakout ages that come. No. So whenever you're dealing with a program, what you're doing for counting is looking at the age that the program was designed for. So if you designed a program for age 0 to 5, that would count as one program for age 0 to 5. And then if 20 people attended it, like, you know, a baby and 2 parents, that's 3 people. So that attendance then goes into attendance for programs ages 0 to 5, even though there were people there who were not age 0 to 5. So with summer reading, it's really going to depend on how you gear the program. If you have ones that are separate for different age groups, or if it's kind of more, it doesn't fit into any of the age groups, it's for everyone, then you would put it into the general interest. But you count the program and the category it was designed for, and then anyone who shows up, regardless of age, that attends that program, they get counted as attendance for the age group that was designed for. You don't have to say, I have this program that was geared for ages 0 to 5, but I have 3 people ages 0 to 5, 4 people ages 6 to 11, and 10 people that are adults. You don't have to break down attendance that way. It's linked to the program. Okay, so someone's asking for the Mls Librarians. Are they a moment in time today number, or is it who was on staff in the reporting year? So generally, again, you're kind of looking for a lot of things. If you can give a count over the year for things like programming, that's what you're looking at. For things that could change throughout the year, so maybe you had a director, they left, it was vacant for a while, and then someone else filled it. You're looking at that snapshot point of September 30th. So how many positions do you have at that point? What are their levels? So that way, I think the idea is we want an accurate count of what the staff level is in the library. So if you have 1 director position and 3 librarian positions, we don't want you to count 9 people because you had some staff changeover in the year, because then it artificially looks like you have 9 staff members when at any time you only have 4. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think, Tammy, if you want to stop the recording, I think we got the majority.